Good evening. Welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Licensing and Safety Committee meeting this Tuesday, the 11th of July. I am Councillor Julia Barrow, Chair of this committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera pan in your general direction. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the town hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meetings that have been held since our last full meeting. The Licensing and Safety Committee held on the 28th of February 2023 and 18th of May 2023, and the Licensing Subcommittee General held on 8th of March 2023. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you. And a show of hands. Thank you. Second item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
I have apology, Chair, for Councillor Mrs. Garcia.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest of non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. No? From the Chair, I declare that I have street traders in my ward. To receive declarations of pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. I'm just being transparent. I'm not sure. So you're the same. Pecuniary interests. And a notice under Section 106, Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Thank you. So if we continue with item 4 of the agenda, the approval of street trading policy and fees for consultation. If I can ask the officer to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Street trading is governed by the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982. The Act defines street trading as selling, exposing or offering for sale any article in a street. Following the adoption of Schedule 4, the Council now has the power to designate streets as prohibited, licence or consent streets in relation to street trading. The adoption of a street trading policy will enable the Council to regulate street traders in a consistent, fair and proportionate way. There is a need for a common set of rules which should apply to all traders. The policy will achieve this and set out criteria and guidance for applicants. The policy explains the application requirements, which gives clarity and transparency to applicants with an early indication as to whether their application is likely to be granted or not. Furthermore, a positive economic impact will come from regulating street traders, as the Council will be able to issue licences or consents for locations which will promote neighbouring businesses rather than create unnecessary competition. If approved for consultation, this period will give those affected time to read the policy and consider steps they may need to take to comply. It also gives the opportunity for comments to be made on how the policy could be improved in order for the Council to implement a fair, robust, clear and well-regulated approach to the licensing of street traders across the borough. Following the consultation period, a further report will be brought to the Licensing and Safety Committee for the purposes of reviewing those comments received and subsequently reviewing the policy and fees if required. Therefore, at this stage, it's recommended that it be recommended to Council that the street trading policy and fees as set out in Appendix A and Appendix B be approved for consultation, and any relevant consultation responses may then be considered by the Licensing and Safety subcommittee and the policy implemented once such consideration has taken place. Following the consultation, if no public objections are received within the consultation period, are later withdrawn, then the Licensing and Safety Subcommittee agrees to implement the policy set out in Appendix B and the fees set out in Appendix B on a date decided by the Licensing and Parking Manager in conjunction with the Chair of the Licensing and Safety Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. If anyone would like to speak, would they please indicate first by raising their hand? Okay. From the Chair, could I just ask, on the front page here, actually it says review. When would you expect the review to take place? Would it be biannually, every 3 years? I mean, I know you're going to monitor the fees as we go along.
Yeah, of course. So with the policy being a brand new policy, we will constantly be reviewing to make sure certain aspects of the policy is working. So the review will be as necessary.
So we won't come back at a further date, say in 3 years' time, to renew the policy?
I'm happy to set a date for 3 years' time if no other reviews are kind of required within that time frame.
Hello. Hi, thank you, Emma. Brilliant piece of work. And there are a few things I just wanted to raise at this stage because they may come up in consultation to make sure that they've been considered before this goes out. So looking at the section that reads about the selling a vehicle on the street, that's page 16 out of 51 in the papers. I was a bit unclear from that as to whether this would be imposed on members of the public selling their own private vehicle, not as part of a business, separate to any business selling cars. So it occurred to me that that's something that we might want to look at before or through the consultation process. Is there anything to say on it now? Because I've got other things as well.
Thank you. So with the selling vehicles on the street, if you are like a vehicle trader, then you would need a consent to do so. Unless you're on a licensed street, then you would need a license to do so. In terms of a member of the public or just a resident selling their own vehicle, a consent would not be required on that occasion.
That's great. Thank you. And then the section about bidding for events, which is page 26 out of 51. The measures that are to be used for evaluating people as providers as part of the bidding process include things like previous compliance, previous events. So it would seem to favour companies that we've worked for before in rugby. So I was just wanting to suggest that we, perhaps through the wording or the footnotes, indicate that that could be, their track record in other towns, maybe taken into consideration, that we wouldn't want it to exclude other businesses from coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. That's there. The reason that's been put in the policy, if somebody's already trading, we will take into account any enforcement, etc., or any action that's been taken against them and their track record. It's not to say that it's there to favoritise any existing traders, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Did you want to ask anything more? I have Councillor Roberts who'd like to. Okay. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, it's two simple and one rather silly one. With the buskers, and here it says that they don't normally require a license. What happens if we get people fighting because I've known people who's been beaten up because they were busking in places where another busker said it was not theirs. So I don't know, is there any way of regulating that?
That wouldn't be, thank you, Councillor, that wouldn't be kind of covered by the street trading policy. If there's obviously a dispute between buskers, that would, I imagine, would be kind of town rangers or the police that would get involved with that one.
The other one, I don't know if it's related or not, it's the selling of vehicles. Obviously, any car that is being displayed for sale, that's being advertised on the street, they will need a license. But what about vehicle park that is advertising other businesses, not for the particular vehicle to be sold, but if I go around my area myself, there are cars or little van that displays other businesses, like, for example, taxi firm. Is there anything?
No, of course, thank you. So the Act defines street trading as selling, exposing or offering for sale any article in the street. So unless an article is physically being kind of sold within the street, then it wouldn't need to be licensed, or it wouldn't need consent.
Councillor Srivastava.
Thank you, Chair. You're talking about consultation. I haven't seen the questionnaire. Is it in questionnaire format, or how it's going to be processed? And there might be traders who might have some language issues. So will they get help?
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of... sorry. Thank you, Sophie.
Through you, Chair, the consultation process will be advertising it on the intranet and the local press, etc. The questions haven't been decided as of yet, but it'll be questions surrounding the policy, asking existing traders, etc. And there'll be contact details should anybody need any clarification or they're finding it difficult to understand, to contact the team, as we do with all consultations.
From the Chair, do you think it might be useful if we had a sheet of frequently asked questions?
That will be put on our website. Normal questions, i.e. can I trade in this area? The standard questions we do get asked day to day, so they will be put out.
Sorry, Chair, because you said it's based on the experience of other councils, other places. So there must be some questionnaire format in existence, and we can look at what we can adopt.
Carolyn, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In terms of the consultation process, remember this is a policy document, so we are inviting any comments on the document, anything, to be meaningful consultation. So obviously we'll be inviting the trade specifically to make comment on it, but it could be anybody, any householder, anybody kind of living in these kind of streets or these kind of areas to make comments on this policy. The police, for example, there is reference to the purpose and the aims, and what we have said in this document that we will be working alongside other policies that the council has, for example, but not limited to, planning, tourism, events management, the general overarching of safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults policies. This is, again, as Emma has done a fabulous piece of work in actually pulling this all together to ensure that there is this transparent policy setting out that is proportionate, that everybody knows what the rules are at the outset. So at this point in time, it is inviting any comment whatsoever on even the introduction of the policy. You know, it might be that in terms of consultation responses, I don't know how vocal the local residents of Rugby are, but, you know, from this one consultation, you might have 3,000 responses saying, we don't want this, in which case, you know, Emma will come back with a schedule showing the comments on this policy and how we can address them, if it's possible to address them. We need this to be meaningful consultation, so not necessarily limited to a questionnaire. Do you like our policy? We're inviting comments from the trade, local businesses, the police, highways, all of the remit to tell us, feedback to us on this policy.
Thank you. Obviously, there will be somebody in the council who will be able to help if they need some help.
Absolutely. And obviously you'll see in terms of the equality impact assessment, and clearly whether it is the case that we learn from this exercise that we don't know enough about our communities in terms of equality and diversity, that might be something else in going forward in this consultation exercise that might inform us in other consultation exercises.
I was going to ask Councillor Robinson if she wanted to come back in at this point.
There was just one other thing, and it was about the consent street. So the wording is consent street means a street in which street trading is prohibited without a consent, and then the licensed street. So what is the process for getting consent on a consent street? Because my reading of it was setting up the process for getting a license on a licensed street, but by inference it would be possible to get consent on a consent street. So is that something that will follow, or?
Thank you. So in terms of there isn't any difference between the application process for a licensed street, well, a license and a consent. It just depends on whether the street that you want to trade on has been kind of adopted as a licensed street or as a consent street. So within the street, we've got a draft order at the end of Appendix A, and that basically explains that the only licensed streets in the borough will be Marketplace, High Street and Sheep Street. All of the streets, well, all of the areas in the borough will be consent streets. So the application process is the same.
Councillor Siani.
Yeah, actually this was a separate point from what I was going to raise, but I just think that the clarity, as we said, with, you know, traders being from different backgrounds, it's quite important that they understand all this, and I think it's, you know, the wording, etc., has to be very closely looked at in order to ensure that that is understandable to them, because they could get confused. So it's something just to consider.
Thank you for that. Again, we take on board those points that the language used is language within the Act. Whether we have a plain English version, if that's possible, or an appendix or a glossary of terms that makes it even, you know, even simpler, or we have that available. But clearly, we are here. This is a consultation exercise. Available to traders, available to people living in and around these streets. You know, we're inviting consultation comments from all of those people, so not just the traders, residents within the borough as well. This is a meaningful consultation.
I like the word meaningful consultation. I think that that's really important. Where you go from after that meaningful consultation, the process thereafter is also important, and I'm sure you've looked into that. But the importance there is really to do with the fact that how you're going to collate that information and then create something that is workable for after all the comments that you received in that consultation. I think that's important as well, and if you could just clarify what will happen in the next step.
So what will happen at the end of the consultation process, the officers will collate all of the comments and produce a schedule which will come back to this very committee for consideration of the comments. So the comments following consultation and the officer comment on that consultation response. So, you know, if it's kind of saying, I don't know, litter is a concern, this could act as a harbourage for vermin, where the officer comment could be, well, it could be a licensing condition that the trader has bins available. That would be a condition attached to the licence. So we feel that that comment could be dealt with by way of condition on the licence. So again, what the comments that come back, and it might be that they're grouped in, you might have, I don't know, 20 responses in connection with local neighbours, local residents saying, on a weekend, this could lead to crime and disorder, with, you know, people queuing and pushing in to have food from a food vendor. And again, we'll certainly take that into consideration, as we do with any other licensing application. And there would be an officer comment about how we feel that we could propose to deal with that, or it might be that we need to consult further with the police. And don't forget that what this policy at the outset does say, that we're trying to be collaborative, not only a fair and even-handed policy, but also to be collaborative in terms of other policies linked, for example, crime and disorder, so that we can, and again, you know, going back to the review period, it is normal to review policies in or around 3 years. But again, as Emma's indicating, she'll put that 3-year date down, that marker. But that doesn't mean to say that because this is a new policy, that it won't be continuously reviewed in any event. So if, for example, there was a particular street with several public houses, taxi ranks, people having burgers, queuing, the police could come back and feed back to us this is not working, then clearly the policy would need to be reviewed at that point. So would need to be reactive, as well as considering the review in the shorter, the mid-term to long-term review. So don't be thinking that this is set in stone, that it would be it's a new policy, continuous review, but then with a long stop date of 3 years. If everything's working wonderfully, then obviously we'd be coming back with review at that time to say, this has worked well, this hasn't worked well, we have been collaborative, the police have made these comments. You know, it could be the fire service, for example, say, actually, there's a hydrant there, it's not suitable. We'd expect that in any event, but, you know, depending on how the policy actually operates and going forward.
Councillor Smith-Tarver.
Just a comment. Rugby is a well-known market town historically, and is a great opportunity for us to make it economically viable, rugby, and a kind of example for the country. So somewhere I think we have to stress that point in the consultation process.
Through your chair, just to come back on that point, it is the second paragraph in the introduction of Appendix A, which says that the street trading policy will work alongside existing council strategies, for example, local crime prevention, planning, tourism, culture, protection of children, vulnerable persons, and the licensing authority will ensure continuing coordination and integration with these policies. Now, we did have a late comment internally in terms of the policy, which particularly asked us to look in terms of the existing market arrangements. And clearly, when I added that line about planning and tourism, that was a general, all-encompassing, because clearly the market is important in terms of the vibrancy of the town centre, so that this policy is meant to complement, not to thwart or diminish or deplete the vibrancy of the existing market and the town centre. It's intended to work alongside with.
My point was this: when do the consultation we write to people, some of people might not know the historically importance of rugby. So it could be highlighted somewhere. They are coming to a very interesting place. That's what I meant.
It's potentially an opportunity.
From the Chair, I just have a very small question about insurance, because I noticed in the policy that public liability insurance is required for a special event. What about for static traders or annual trading? I didn't see that public liability insurance was a requirement. Would that be a term and condition attached to the licence?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it could be added as a condition if necessary.
Well, I think as it is usually a requirement, if you're going to book a stall through an operator, you are required to have insurance. So as a council, we would be required to make sure that our traders were insured.
Can I just come back on the public event?
Yeah. Caroline, if you'd like to come.
Thank you, Chair. Again, in terms of the public event and the express reference to public liability insurance, with a public event where there's an expectation or an anticipation that there would be crowds of people. And again, this is make experience count from other food festivals and other experiences throughout the country where it may be, and it did happen in my hometown, where there was a food festival and lots of people became ill. And because there was no express provision in terms of the cooking of curry leaves, there were no prosecutions that followed, but it was still, there were people who were ill, and the public liability of the event had to kick in.
Thank you. Councillor Siani.
I just, going back to how economically viable it is, I think it's really important. And how much have you done to make sure, or is it part of the consultation, to make sure that the application costs, licence costs, etc., is actually viable for businesses, particularly in the economic climate that we're facing at the moment?
Thank you. So the fees have been worked out on a cost recovery basis, on kind of predictions of kind of officer time and our expenses that we expect to come across. But obviously, like the policy itself, the fees, again, will be kind of kept under constant review as well. So if it turns out that it's actually costing us more than what we're charging, then we'll review it in that way. Equally, the other way around, if it's not costing us as much as what we're charging, then again we'll review to amend the fees accordingly.
Sorry, Rugby is a very good multicultural town. I think somewhere is a good opportunity for her to encourage that aspect.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Srizava. I don't think anyone disagrees with you. And the objectives of the policy on the page 4 does actually list the objectives that we are trying to achieve here. I appreciate that six of you, half of us, weren't here in February, but this is part of a long process. And we did start in February with the adoption of Section 4 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, which went to Council. So following on from that, The officers have pulled together over a great number of weeks, actually, with legal and with their finance colleagues, this policy document and the fees that are attached. So tonight we're looking at this to go out to consultation. So first of all, it will go to full council to get the approval to go out to consultation. And then following that, as has already been said, the anything that we receive, whether it's an objection or it's in favour or it's tweaking the details or whatever it might be, that will come back, and officers will then compile that to bring back to committee. A date of November the 15th is suggested for that. Do we have... Oh, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
It's on considering application. You say the activities are likely to cause nuisance and annoyance to neighbouring properties. Can we make sure that even when the application is in and there is no, they don't indicate there would be any, can we put a clause that say that further on after permission has been granted, that they don't go back on this and start putting like a sandwich board on pavement where it is actually causing problem, because what you will see where they've got restaurant and quite narrow pavement, they put their board advertising their day's menu or promotion, and that is causing problem to the public, especially people with pushchair or people with wheelchair. So is there a way of making sure that does not happen? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. In terms of the policy itself as drafted, Section 21 relates to revoking consents. So that gives express details of when, for example, if the licence holder had been charged by the police, etc., or there was any other reasonable cause. What you've expressly referred to is, I agree with you, is the bane of my life, as perhaps I should have declared an interest as a former pram pusher, walking along the street with objects displayed on the public highway and walking along where cars are parked, and you think, actually, this is a footpath. Shall I say that again? Foot. Right to pass and repass on foot with a space to actually do that. And again, with an ageing population and the number of disabled persons, wheelchairs or mobility scooters, it can be a problem. But again, we have to deal with that alongside our highways colleagues at the county council. The power in terms of the adoption of footpaths and roadways and that enforcement falls with the county council. Now, we all know that in terms of county highways, it is stretched, and whether in Warwickshire County Council, whether the enforcement on highways is limited or even, dare I say, perhaps non-existent. But we will clearly undertake to work alongside our county highway colleagues who have the responsibility for those things that you've described, the hoardings. But what we could do is take it into consideration with a renewed application. That might not be of itself on a first occasion, but I'm guessing my colleagues here will be out with minor offence type notices to say, actually, your application was for this street trading. We did say we don't want hoardings, we don't want this advertisement on the public highway because you don't have authority to do that. So again, I'm guessing that they'll be out there monitoring that, but that has to work again together with our county council highways colleagues.
Sophie, if you'd like to come in.
Through you, Chair. That's the whole idea of this policy, so we can regulate street trading, so people can't just pop up. So there'll be a meaningful consultation with our partners before a trading licence is granted. The team will be carrying out enforcement checks, They will be visiting and maybe feedback from yourselves, the community, other businesses. So this policy will make it more, it'll regulate it, and everyone will be accounted for, etc.
Are there any more speakers? More questions? So shall we go to the vote then? Could I have a show of hands in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. So unanimous. That brings our business this evening to an end. If I could ask you to stop the live streaming, please. Thank you everyone for your attendance.